Welcome to Ideagen TV. We are here at the Washington Roundtable today with Dan Kerns, the president of the Father McKenna Center. Dan, welcome.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you for being here with us today. So we'd like to dive in. You are president of the Father McKenna Center. So can you describe kind of what are the main services offered there?
The Father McKenna Center is a nonprofit with a primary focus on supporting men who are experiencing homelessness. To that end, we have a day program, and the day program includes case management. It includes 2 meals a day. There's a clothing closet as well, and kind of taking care of some of those urgent needs. We also have a hyperthermia program during the winter months, 5 months. Currently, we are in hyperthermia, and we will end that program at the start of April. But that's a place where a man may be able to find 12 hours of shelter and experience, in addition to that, some of the case management that would go on with that. In addition, the Father McKenna Center has a food pantry, not simply for the men that we serve, but for those families in Noma primarily, Ward 6, who are experiencing food uncertainty, food instability. So we try to bundle all of this up into a kind of a comprehensive program to support those who are in our neighborhood.
It's truly an incredible mission and touches upon many of the Sustainable Development Goals, which, as you know, Ideagen talks about as one of our backdrops there. We see homelessness a lot around the Washington, D.C. area. So what are some of the most substantial factors in limiting the success of those who visit your center?
I think the men that come to us are in need of opportunity. Many of them have been challenged because of an educational system that hasn't supported them well. A number of them have been incarcerated, and they need the support that they need coming out of incarceration and to avoid recidivism. Some of our people are those who are struggling with some sort of a mental illness, and we need to be able to link them to support there. So I think first and foremost, it's to deal with the challenges these men are experiencing. And then I think the second thing that men experience is a lack of opportunity. And how do we get them to a point where they feel confident, they feel prepared, and they feel ready for that next step? And a lot of our case management goes into that, in providing them with those skills and then linking them up to resources that will help them get a job, obtain a stable place to live, and continuing support in some of their other needs.
An incredible range of services that you all provide. And you mentioned we're currently in the winter months, but not only that, we're in the tail end of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so how has the pandemic impacted those who are really most vulnerable that come to your center?
It's interesting. That's a good question. The pandemic, I think there have been mixed. There's been a mixed impact, and not all of it bad, interestingly enough. Like for all of us, the lockdown, the quarantine, and the restrictions that were placed upon us had a profound impact on the way we could administer our program. For example, our hypothermia program this year was only half the size of what it had been pre-COVID because of social distancing. So there are those restrictions that we are now continuing to deal with. The good news is that as of March 1, we will be returning to some normalcy in terms of the social distancing piece, but also in terms of our ability to have volunteers on our campus. It's very difficult for us to do all of our work with paid staff. We rely heavily on volunteers, and that's something that is starting to change at this point. I mentioned that the impact has not been all bad, and I think it's important to point out that there have been a number of social service agencies like the McKenna Center that have stepped up, and the additional resources that our men have received from other social service agencies has been good. So, I think we can think about the negative side of it, but I also think that we can think about those positive lessons that have been learned, and hopefully they will continue to be resources available to men going forward in the future.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there have been a lot of negative side effects, but those are kind of uncontrollable, and then twist that into something that's positive. And I'm glad to hear that, one, your services are opening back up, and that we see other organizations stepping up in those times of need. I mean, that's what's been most important, and has been such a profound impact that we've seen during the pandemic, is that organizations are stepping up all across the board. So how does the Father McKenna Center positively impact the lives of DC residents in ways other organizations may not?
Well, I think the approach we take is twofold. One, and I mentioned that there are urgent needs that the men come to us that they have. And, the need for food, the need for clothing, and that sort of thing. Those are urgent needs that have to be taken care of. Immediate, urgent, and necessary. But we also take the approach that we're trying to end homelessness for these men permanently. So the approach we take in case management and the approach we take beyond that urgent need is to say, what sort of skills do these gentlemen need that will turn their life around? We're looking for transformative change. We want to see these men with a job, with a steady job. We want to see them in stable housing. So our approach goes from the urgent to the transformative, with the idea that after some time, we will see these men self-sufficient and independent. To that end, we are going to be embarking on that. This new approach this spring is the concept of a McKenna Academy. The McKenna Academy will be a 6-month program where men will be with us 5 days a week, all day. We will bring them to us from shelters, and we will return them to the shelters at the end of the day. The curriculum that we've developed is going to focus on education. It's going to focus on job skills. It's going to focus on behavior modification for those men who need that. So the idea is that at the end of this 6-month period, we will have men who were ready to take the next step and transforming their life so that they can move to a next level. That, I think, is a kind of a unique approach that we take that others may not be doing. And that's not to say those who are doing the urgent need intervention, that's great. But I think we have to look at beyond that. How can we transform lives?
No, absolutely. I mean, I see a lot of them. I live in the general vicinity of the Father McKenna Center, and I see a lot of shelters and food pantries and different things like that. But the fact that your organization goes beyond that immediate need and helps to supply them with the resources and the knowledge to continue to get out of poverty, get out of homelessness. It's not just an immediate need, because then that immediate need needs to happen tomorrow and the next day and the next day. But providing those resources is just incredible. And you had mentioned, other organizations stepping up. So in what ways can the government or other DC businesses work to improve the lives of those who visit your center?
I think that we need to communicate with one another, and we have to develop these collaborations that are necessary. One of the things that the McKenna Academy we're trying to do is build a relationship with the shelters that Catholic Charities, for example, provides, and some other groups in the community. We're also looking at partnering with So Others Might Eat to see if there are ways that we can build together. It's important that we don't have redundant services and we don't exist in silos. And that's the old concept of silos is a hackneyed expression, but we need to be collaborating. We need to be communicating with each other. And the same thing with DC government.
Absolutely. And yourself, you're a former educator, being a president and headmaster of a DC school yourself. And now, because of the Father McKenna Center's location, which is right next to Gonzaga College High School, how is your role as president of the McKenna Center combined with your interest of youth education and service?
Well, I think I talked about the way our hope of transforming the lives of the men and the families we serve. And that's one type of transformation. But I also think it's important that we have, because of our location on the Gonzaga campus, it's important that we have an opportunity to transform the thinking of some young men who will be decision makers, and for them to experience and to be able to work at the McKenna Center gives them an entirely different concept of what it means to, it's not simply talking about social teaching, it's looking at it and trying to resolve it. Our staff members go into some of their classes and talk about kind of the relationships that we have. Next week, we begin to invite the boys back. So the boys will be at the center working, and that's a profound effect that they have. I had two sons who went to Gonzaga, and I always was very proud to say Gonzaga is probably the only school in the country that has a homeless shelter on their campus. And that's walking the walk. It's simply not talking about things. It's kind of saying, okay, we're going to support that in a different way. In addition to the Gonzaga students, we sponsor immersion programs. We've got a college group coming in next month. We have other local high schools where young men and young women are able to come in and support it as well. So I think that when I look at the impact of our program, it's impact on the men and the families we serve, but it's also impacting the perspectives of those people who are helping us.
That's incredible. We've heard a lot about sustainability over the course of Ideagen TV, and a theme that I think is crucial is education and teaching the youth, the next generation, because that helps sets up the future. It helps sets up sustainability and homelessness across the nation. And so to be combined with Gonzaga College High School, which by the way is an incredible high school in the area, and teaching those people not only that these people have the lives, but let's help educate them, give them the resources, and then set them up so that they could help us in the future. It's a profound thought.
I think it's the sustainability of the message.
Yeah.
How do we pass that message to our kids and to the next generation? And how do they carry on the legacy of in our case, Father McKenna, who was a Jesuit priest who was known as the apostle of the poor. And Father McKenna died 40 years ago this May. But his legacy, his message, and the impact of his work continues because of the sustainability of that message.
That's truly inspirational. Could you discuss a little bit the struggles residents face in obtaining employment without a permanent living address, but also, obtaining permanent living without employment as well?
That's an interesting way to look at that. I think that men who don't have a permanent place to live, number one, they don't have a place that they're going back to, the same place every night. They don't have a place to keep their clothes. They don't have a stable place where they are, taking showers and all of that sort of thing. At McKenna Center, actually, we do provide, there's a place where the men can take a shower. We'll do their laundry. We understand the relationships that many of us, that we take that for granted. We don't even think about that as an impediment. But for a man who doesn't have that resource, or a man or a woman who doesn't have that resource, it's very tough to hold down a job. The flip side of it is, if you don't have employment, even subsidized housing costs something, and there are expenses related to that. So the relationship is equally important. For the man who has a job, man or woman who has a job, they at least can contribute to their own well-being, their own financial well-being, and it gives them a sense of accomplishment. It gives them a sense of purpose to have that job and be able to cover some of those expenses. In our hypothermia program this past winter, we had 8 men who have kind of transitioned from being unemployed to getting a job. And when I talk to them, when I see them in our dining room and so forth, they could not be prouder of the work that they're doing. And there's this great sense of accomplishment. And that, I think, is the emotional aspect of that. They're different men because they have that opportunity.
Yeah, and that's incredible too. I think that it really sounds like a vicious cycle. Not having a place to live and not having a home kind of going hand in hand. And I know to get positions, internships, I had to put a resident. I had to put an address. For financial statements and for other things like that. And I love the fact that it sounds like the Father McKenna Center is kind of going right in between those two and providing the resources to help end that cycle back and forth.
There are other resources which, to your point, and I never thought of them. Many of our men don't have Social Security cards or numbers. They don't have birth certificates because the birth certificates were lost. That's probably one of the most important jobs that our case managers do, is to link these gentlemen up to the documents that they need even to get a job, even to present themselves as a candidate. Mm-hmm. And those are things that we as those of us who are not in that situation don't even comprehend or understand.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's easy if you're not understanding or educated about the topic to say, why can't they just go find a job, or why can't they just find a house? But in reality, it's much more complex than that. So we've talked about, the fact that the Father McKenna Center is attached to Gonzaga College High School. And so where and how do you think the next generation, my generation or my kids, can make the largest impact on those struggling, like the individuals at the Father McKenna Center?
I think it's understanding. I think it's having a perspective that there is need, and we all have a responsibility to fulfill that need. And that's something that comes from upbringing and parents who instill that value in their children. I think it's important for schools to have mandatory service requirements, for example, and really give young men and young women an opportunity to serve in areas like the McKenna Center, but so many others. There's so many great service agencies in our city to do that. But I also think it's important that the conversation is not simply service, it's a discussion. And do students who have the service opportunities, are they able to kind of talk about what that means and how that shapes their responsibilities going forward? So I think it's all about really raising the question with young people, raising the question, informing them of need, and then saying, this is your responsibility as a citizen.
Yeah, absolutely. And to share a small insight, I went to a local high school and there was a service requirement. I had to go out and work, and I chose a homeless shelter, a local homeless shelter. And while I was there, I was interacting with one of the women and said, I need to write a resume. I don't know how to do it. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to begin. And I had just recently developed my own resume, just coming out of high school. So I sat down with her, started to develop it. And for some reason, her name I recognized it. Next day, I'm in my high school class, and a student sits down next to me, and that was her mother. That was her mother at that homeless shelter who needed help writing the resume. And so that truly impacted me. And I realized that, it is the perspective aspect that you talk about, that we need to understand that these are people that are struggling, that may have had bad, whether it's choices or circumstances. And I'm just glad that there's a Father McKenna Center and that you're leading it in the DC area. So thank you, Dan Kerns, for sitting with us, talking with us today. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.